much further ado, oh, here we go. Perfect. Good timing, Mike. Thank you very much. I have an easy job as host today. The heavy lifting is being done by our guest speakers. Mr. Mike Thomas, Dr. Jonathan Bright, and ymuno â mi heddi. So I'm joined today by Mr. Mike Thomas and by Dr. Jonathan Bright. Mike is head of AI policy and coordination in Llywodraeth Cymru in Welsh Government, and has been the driving force in making this webinar happen. And Jonathan is a research fellow, the head of online safety and the head of AI for public services in the public policy programme for the Alan Turing Institute. We've also got Mike Erskine from CDPS here, managing all the tech in the background and helping out with the questions and the answers as well. So dwi'n mynd i drosglwyddo I Mike Thomas I ddechrau, ac yna byddwn ni'n clywed gan Jonathan. So I'm going to hand over to Mike Thomas to start, and then we'll hear from Jonathan. And Mike Erskine will be back with me to help out with the questions at the end. Okay, dyma ni. Over to you, Mike. Good morning.
Thanks, Pete, and good morning, everyone. So as Pete just outlined, I'm Mike Thomas, and I'm head of AI policy at Welsh Government. So that means I'm responsible for developing our national position on artificial intelligence. And at the moment, that's revolving around the need to ensure that where AI technologies are used in Wales, they're done so in responsible, ethical, and fair and safe ways. So AI is a massive hype subject right now. You cannot get away from it in the news, on social media, online, from ChatGPT, Google Bard, right out to the very polarized and extreme views of the world is going to end in 2 years, which we don't agree with, by the way. But how do we cut through all that noise and make sense of it all? And why is AI so important for Wales? Well, AI technologies are likely to be the most pervasive we'll see in our lifetimes, and they have the potential to massively accelerate our economy. Broad estimates suggest by as much as 10%, which is around £8 billion by 2030 alone in Wales. There's also significant opportunity to improve public service delivery, and that's one of the main reasons we're all here today. But used for the right reasons and in the right ways, AI should also have a positive impact on every citizen across Wales. So that's no small challenge for everyone on the call this morning. Back in January, we completed something called an AI landscape review, a state of the nation report, if you like, that identified 5 key themes that we as a government would like to focus on if we're able to take full advantage of AI. And this included theme 1, which is AI literacy. And that's giving people in the public sector in Wales the knowledge and skills to navigate what's an incredibly complex space. So in CDPS, we have colleagues supporting us with these sessions who have a fantastic holistic position in supporting wider organisations across Wales to create better public services. And in the Alan Turing Institute, we not only have the UK's National Institute for Data Science and AI, but also global thought leaders on the subject. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Jonathan Bright from the Turing, who's going to lead you through today's session. Diolch.
Thanks so much, Mike and Peter, for the introduction and for organising this event and the opportunity to be here. It's a real pleasure to have the chance to talk to all of you about a subject that's really close to my heart, artificial intelligence in government. As both Mike and Peter have said, I'm working at the Turing Institute. This is the UK's National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. And one of the teams I head up, which is the most relevant for today, is AI and public services. So my job when I'm thinking about this team is to help people in government and the public sector in the UK get the best out of data science and artificial intelligence, make use of the technology in a responsible and ethical way to improve public services. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. Let me just give you a kind of roadmap of the things I'm going to go through in about 30 minutes and hopefully leaving plenty of time for Q&A at the end. I'm going to briefly talk about the Turing Institute and about the public policy programme which I work, just to put it in people's minds if you haven't come across it before. Then I'm going to offer my definition of artificial intelligence. What does this technology actually mean? Say a little bit about the state of the field, say a little bit about why over the last 9 months there's been a real sort of step change in the amount of people talking about the technology and thinking about the technology. Then I'm going to go through, and this will be the main part of the work, I think, use cases within the public sector, talk about the different types of things that AI can be used to do, or the things that people are thinking about doing with it. So I'm going to talk about bits of technology which are either available now or definitely coming in the next few years. So the idea isn't to look 20 or 30 years into the future, but to talk about things that are happening in the very near term and things that I really think are worth thinking about if you're in government, if you're in the public sector. And finally, I'll talk through some of the risks and say some things about responsible AI innovation. I won't go into that too much, but it's really important to highlight this if you're thinking about programs of change with AI embedded within them, to think about these things right at the outset. So I'll say a little bit about that as well. Great, so let me start with the Turing. So as Mike said, the Turing is the UK's National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. It was formed by 5 universities, and then another 8 or so have joined in, and now more and more are joining all the time. And so the aim of this institute is to act as a focal point for the UK's data science and artificial intelligence expertise, to bring together all the expertise throughout the UK's university system, and to centralize that and to act as a point of contact between that and other parts of the economy, civil society, and especially government. The work of the Turing Institute is divided into a number of programs. We've got programs on health, we've got programs on the environment, on defense and security, and there's my program, which is the public policy program. This, as I said at the beginning, is focused on helping government get the best out of data science and artificial intelligence. I'll skip over the next couple of slides very briefly. I mean, we work both on the governance of AI, thinking about how it can be regulated, and also using AI for government, thinking how we can put the technology into practice to help policymaking, to help public services, and what it takes to do that in an effective way. This is the structure of the team, which again I won't go through in detail. And this slide I just really wanted to highlight that we've done in the 5 or so years of our existence, have had more than 60 projects. We've got currently more than 50 full-time researchers with another 40 or so affiliates across 15 universities, and I've worked with, I mean, that says 85, it's now probably closer to 100 beneficiaries in the public sector, with the hundreds of thousands of hours of work. So I just wanted to say at the beginning, if you're in the public sector, which I believe pretty much everyone on the call is, and you're working in some area of AI, data science, would like to reach out to me or reach out to us to discuss that, to get some advice, to help think through what a useful project would look like, do feel free to get in touch. And I'll leave my email at the end, and hopefully it'll be distributed after the webinar, because that's what we're here for. And as an academic non-profit institution, we're positioned to offer hopefully unbiased and impartial advice. Great. Anyway, so that's just a very little bit about the Turing Institute. So now let me move on to the meat of the talk, artificial intelligence in government. So I want to start off with some definitions, because this term AI is thrown around a lot and it's applied to lots and lots of different things. So what does it actually mean, or what do I mean when I say artificial intelligence? Well, the definition I prefer of artificial intelligence is just a technology that imitates human intelligence or performs human-like tasks in some way. And this is often based on another term you'll hear around a lot in AI, machine learning. Machine learning simply means a machine, a computer, a piece of technology whose behavior is learned rather than being explicitly programmed. It's based on past data or past experiences rather than given explicit rules to do things in explicit situations. Now, artificial intelligence has a really wide range of applications, because human intelligence also has a really wide range of applications. Humans can do lots and lots of different things. I think everyone, that kind of almost goes without saying. So this is one of the reasons why artificial intelligence brings together such a broad range of technologies and a broad range of different sectors. It's because human intelligence itself is very broad. So if we're talking about machines that are trying to mimic or imitate human intelligence, well, they're going to be very, very broad as well. In order to impose some sort of order on this very broad field, and when I'm talking to people in government about what this technology can do, I like to separate things in terms of 3 broad types of intelligence, 3 broad categories of human intelligence where you see a lot of technological development. And these are perception, prediction, and generation. So let me talk through those one by one. Perception, obviously, is about understanding or interpreting a situation, detecting or sensing things in an environment in images, in video data, in audio data, in text data, whatever it might be. Things like identifying objects in satellite images, recognizing faces, understanding prompts. And this is one of the big areas of AI, and there has been has been for 20 or 25 years. And one thing that I will mention throughout this talk is that even though, as Mike said, we're going through the upwards part of a hype cycle right now about the technology, lots of this technology isn't new in any, in any genuine sense. And much of it's been around 10, 20, or even 30, even 40 years, depending on how you define it exactly. So perception would be the first one. As I said, technology in this area has been around for a while. Then prediction, again, an area of technology which has been developing for decades, analyzing situations, forecasting outcomes, ranking solutions, or optimizing solutions, optimizing the way things are done. Things like determining creditworthiness, forecasting the stock market, etc. Again, decades of research in this technology and already applied across government, but now, of course, lots of thinking about how it can be applied further. And then the final one, which certainly seems the newest, again, a technology which has been in the works for a while, but undoubtedly achieved a breakthrough in public consciousness towards the end of last year, generation, using AI to create new things, to create new text, to create new images, to create new voices, or to take an existing voice and generate new speech from that voice. Things like ChatGPT, of course, which many people on the call would have heard of, or some of the image generation software that we're seeing around now, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E. Some of this stuff, of course, now being integrated into photo editing software like Adobe. So these are the three categories, and I'm going to come back to these throughout the talk. The three big picture things that I think AI can do: perception, prediction, and generation. I also want to make a couple of comments about these terms: narrow AI, broad AI, and artificial general intelligence, which again, the things that you'll hear thrown around and becoming especially important as we start to talk about what you might see as the next wave of AI, or AI expanding quite a lot the amount of things it can do. Narrow AI, and this is the type of AI that we've had, the vast majority of applications were narrow AI up until now. Narrow AI is AI that's focused on one specific task. It does one thing. It might do it well or do it badly, but it's only trying to do one thing. And often when you're talking about a narrow AI system, you're talking about a system where there's a bit of artificial intelligence embedded in a wider, more mechanistic system, which is rules-based and is not necessarily what you would call AI. A good example of this is facial recognition at border crossings. Here you've got a piece of artificial intelligence which is trying to determine whether the person standing in front of the camera has the same face as the facial image in the passport which is being presented to it. And that's based on artificial intelligence, of course, but that's embedded within a wider mechanistic system which says who can and cannot cross the border. So that you've got an application of narrow AI doing one thing in the public sector in the context of a wider system. Broad AI, you're starting to talk about systems that can do a range of different things, potentially interact a little bit with the world. Perhaps they bring together a range of bits of narrow AI and put them together into some kind of ensemble, which together means they can do more than just one task. So self-driving car is a good example of this. A self-driving car does lots of different things. It doesn't just do one thing. There's lots of different skills, lots of different types of intelligence that need to come together in order to allow someone to drive a car. And as we talk about narrow AI and broad AI, and this is often sort of placed on a scale, towards the other end of the scale is something that people like to call artificial general intelligence. And this is where many people think the field is going to end up eventually. You can get very diverging predictions over how long it will take to get there. The most optimistic people are talking about a few years. Others would disagree with that, but certainly we're making big strides towards this. Artificial general intelligence is technology that isn't trained to perform a particular task. Rather, it's sort of trained in general on the world, and through that training can perform a wide range of tasks and potentially solve previously unknown tasks. And I think that ChatGPT, which, as I said, many people on the call will have engaged with, is the first the first example of this that's really come to public attention, the first time people in the public have really sort of engaged with a tool that has this very generalist function. It can write an email, it can write a letter, it can summarize a paper, but it can also write a piece of poetry, or it can offer you suggestions for where to go on holiday and act as a kind of web browser. It does all sorts of different things. And people are right now discovering what are its exact competencies, what can it do well, and what can it do badly. And although few people would say that ChatGPT is a really good example of artificial general intelligence, although we're there yet, definitely in the next few years, it's a place where lots of the big labs that are working on this technology want to get to. And that sort of leads me on to commenting on the state of the field. As I said, AI isn't new. It's been an active field of research for decades. Predictive analytics, if you include that as AI, is arguably even older than that. But there's definitely a sort of feeling that we're reaching some kind of change point in terms of public consciousness, in terms of potential for uptake. As Mike said, this is now something that's on everyone's lips. And it is worth reflecting on why that is the case. What happened? The key breakthrough of ChatGPT was not, in my view, that it was a very, a sophisticated piece of technology that we'd never seen before, because these large language models have been around, definitely for a few years, more than 5 years. They've been progressively developing, they've been progressively getting larger, they've been progressively getting more complex, but it's by no means the first time we saw a large language model that was capable of generating text. What ChatGPT, in my view, really did well was to break through a safety and reliability barrier. So in the past, when big tech firms have tried to release chatbots like this, Microsoft had tried it in the past, Facebook have tried it in the past, what happened almost instantly was that these bots were shown to create misinformation, they were shown to create hate speech, they were shown to create anti-Semitism or deny the Holocaust or all sorts of things like this. And so they were put up, and within a week or a couple of weeks they were taken off the internet as basically being too embarrassing for the company that had published them. ChatGPT was the first one, in my view, that really got around that and really was up in a way that the company behind it, OpenAI, which is of course strongly supported by Microsoft, was happy to leave up. And that's not to say that it never created any misinformation, but rather it reached a level of safety and reliability that meant it could stay in the public domain. And there's interesting articles written about Google that said even a few months before ChatGPT, Google was thinking of this technology, the large language model technology, as something that it would be 5 or 10 years before it was implemented into their systems because of these safety concerns. And now they suddenly saw a technology which could be implemented within a few months. And so the situation we're in right now, we have these very large models, the GPTs or Google's Bard, Llama 2, which Facebook just released this week. But we also have billions being plowed in by all the big firms to work on the next generation of models. And many people think that the next generation, which is coming as early as next year, will show another step change in performance and abilities, which again will drive these things further up the public agenda. And this is a quote. So the graphic I showed on the previous slide was also from this website, and I do recommend it to you if you're interested in understanding particularly the scale of large language models. ChatGPT gained more than 100 million users in its first 2 months, and it's now estimated to produce a volume of text every 14 days, equivalent to all the printed works of humanity. It's from lifearchitect.ai, which, as I said, it's a website I recommend to you if you're interested in this area. That's a technology that's arrived, and it's demonstrating really important use cases. And this is the change point in action, if you like. We're now starting to talk about types of artificial intelligence which are really becoming massified and being placed in the hands of everyone, basically, or everyone with an internet connection. So that's a little bit about how I define AI and the state of the field. Now let's move on to the heart of this presentation, AI in government and public services. What can we actually use this technology for in the public sector? And I want to split up this section again into those three categories, which I was talking about: perception, prediction, and generation, because I think you can find use cases across all of these three categories. Let's start off with perception. Again, going back to this idea of using AI to do things like recognize images. As I said, this is a very well-established use case. There's nothing new about this, and you can see this already in operation throughout the public sector, especially with the border crossings, passport gates, as I recommend, as I mentioned earlier. Facial recognition, or recognizing things in images, one of the earliest things that people in AI were working on. Geoffrey Hinton, who was the supervisor of many of the people who are behind ChatGPT, a lot of the early work on number recognition within images. So we've got facial recognition being extremely well established across the public sector. Recognizing things out of aerial imagery is a growing use case, and particularly important one for local government as they seek to understand the environment in which they're operating. And this is something we've been working on a little bit, using satellite imagery to recognize and detect road layouts, or biomass, or solar panels, or swimming pools, or count the number of trees in an area. All of these things, a human can do these pretty easily by looking at an image, but what the human can't do is do it at scale, process tens of thousands of images quickly and efficiently. And this is what AI is kind of enabling. We're also seeing its widespread application in the health sector, starting to be used in radiology to understand and process all the various scans that people go through. And you can think of lots of other image processing potential applications throughout local government. Planning applications was one that the Turing Institute worked on. Can the technology be used to speed up the UK's planning system? Beyond image perception, you can now see this perception extending into text. And this is, I would say, a bit sort of newer application areas, but undoubtedly ones that have impact across the public sector. The US has something called the Quick Disability Decision Scheme, where it seeks to automatically recognize disability applications which have a high chance of success. It's processing evidence submitted by the person, also medical evidence submitted by doctors, extracting key features from that text. And this is using this sort of automatic text processing to process service applications, I think, is a huge opportunity area throughout UK government, because there's an enormous amount of processes across government, which basically involve someone filling in a form and someone else evaluating that form and perhaps accompanying documents. And these, many parts of government have to do this tens, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of times per year. So enabling some of that process to happen quicker by making use of the perceptual abilities of AI, the ability to perceive information in text documents, I think is a real opportunity area. Moving on from perception to prediction, and this is often the next thing in the chain, we're seeing lots of predictive analytics being applied across government, and I think there's an enormous amount of scope for more. Faculty AI produced a tool which it's been selling to different parts of the NHS to predict appointment outcomes, predict missed appointments, which it says saves up to 100,000 appointments per year in the NHS. We've seen lots of bits of technology attempting to predict whether children are in danger, to be applied to children's social work. I've seen people thinking about predicting prisoners at risk, or predicting the chance of recidivism, or predicting the seriousness of a complaint that's been received. All sorts of areas where, especially if you're talking about a service which has 10,000 or 100,000, if you like, iterations every year, there's good potential for predictive analytics to try and say something sensible about the outcome. And once you have that prediction, you have the potential to move towards prioritization. And this, again, is a crucial area of government work where I see there's a lot of potential for AI to help. One of the key things that people in government do is optimize the allocation of scarce resources. And this could be hospital beds, but it also could be police officers working on tips, or it could be people inspecting food hygiene standards, or inspecting homes of multiple occupation or inspecting tax compliance. There's all sorts of areas where you have a limited amount of people trying to do a job, and there's an enormous amount of places where they could go to do their job. So the potential for systems to optimize where they're going and to get the best out of those resources, again, I think is one of the areas where people working in our AI are extremely enthusiastic about. And the last area to talk about, and again, getting back to this sort of new area which is being hyped up a lot, but which I do think there's genuine potential for, is this area of generation. Can we use things like ChatGPT and its accompanying technology to improve the work of government? And there's two areas where you can see generation fitting in. The first is simply in terms of back office productivity. The US Department for Transport has been quite explicit about the fact that it's using ChatGPT and other accompanying technologies to help it write computer code. And you know, they're the department that's been explicit about it, but almost anyone who's involved in computer programming at the moment is using these tools to help out with their day-to-day, to improve their productivity. So that's a use case that already exists. Beyond that, we can see emerging, these don't quite exist yet, but certainly emerging technologies to help people write reports, to fill in forms, to write emails. I mean, arguably it does exist, depending on how much you want to trust ChatGPT. There's an enormous amount of government work that involves statutory reporting or involves form filling in, involves these quite long and labor-intensive processes. If we can start to integrate generative technology into these things, and it has to be done in a sensible way, but to use that to support the activities of the staff, there's a huge potential here to increase their productivity and potentially free up some of their time to focus on the more skilled things. It is potential. There's a long way to go to actually implement it, but the potential is there. And I think in the next few years, you're going to see a lot of tools emerging that try and do things like fill in forms automatically. And of course, moving on from back office productivity, there's also this tantalizing possibility to improve interaction with citizens, to use this technology, which is sometimes called conversational AI, to improve the way that citizens can find out information about government, to improve the way that citizens can feed back to government, or the government can understand what citizens are doing. And we've already seen applications of this in Romania, in Iceland, in Portugal, in Tokyo. You know, there'll be more by the time I've finished this presentation. In Austin, Texas, there's a police department that's allowing people to use ChatGPT-like technology to file police complaints, to file low-level police complaints. One of the real hopes here, and this technology doesn't quite exist yet, but you can kind of see it potentially emerging in the next few years, is a kind of a virtual assistant which behaves in the same way as a real person, that you could explain a new policy context to this assistant, and then it could itself explain it to citizens in a lot of different languages, you know, supporting the widespread different language requirements that we have across the UK. To take a very simple example, let's say parking regulations have changed in a given area. You could write a document in free text explaining these changes, use that to retrain the model that sits within your department that's chatting with citizens. And then when citizens come in and ask, you know, how do I park, or how is traffic organized in this city, it could explain it to them in human language. And again, in you know, being sort of agnostic in precisely which language it's using. I think these type of chatbots could quickly become the normal way of interacting with services, and that's both services in the private sector and the public sector. And then, you know, very quickly, I think it's something that could emerge in the next few years. So I think it's something really important for government to start thinking about and planning, you know, how to get on board with, essentially. So that's some of the potential. That's, if you like, my contribution to the hype cycle. And I'll repeat it again. We're definitely going through a hype cycle. There's going to be also a period where expectations come back down again, or when we sort of have a more closer understanding of where the technology is now and be able to separate things that we're hoping it'll do in 10 years from things it can do right now. But I nevertheless think that And this is the common with all hype cycles, right? We go up and then there's a bit of disappointment, but you arrive at a new normal, which is higher than where you started. But anyway, so we're on this hype cycle. And while we're on that, of course, it is really important, especially for the public sector, to keep in mind potential risks behind this technology and thinking about ways to innovate responsibly. One of the most obvious risks, and this is something if you've engaged with AI a little bit, you'll have probably seen, heard and seen some stories about it, is in the area of bias and discrimination. Put very simply, systems that might work well for the average person don't necessarily work well for everyone. And this is particularly important, of course, for the public sector, which has a duty to offer services to all citizens and to work well for all citizens. One of the big examples of this in the UK public sector was the Passport Office's photo checker application, which was released a few years back. The aim of this application, which is a great idea for an application, was that you can submit your passport photo online and there'll be an app that automatically checks whether the photo seems to be suitable for a passport, whether you're smiling or not, whether the lighting is correct. But it really didn't work very well for people with dark skin, particularly in its first iteration. And there's several examples of people, the system is telling them that they're smiling when they're clearly not smiling. And these examples of bias, of discrimination in outcomes can also be seen, and I think are particularly important to consider in predictive systems or systems that might be making some type of a decision on a person. They've been strongly criticized in the US systems which are being used to help judges make decisions about bail or decisions about releasing prisoners on the basis of whether they're likely to be recidivists or not. ProPublica, and this is a report that's 7 or 8 years old, but I recommend this ProPublica report to you if you're interested in this area. So this is a first really important area to consider. Does the system work well for all of the people who might be using it? A second one, closely related, is in the area of transparency and public trust. People are inherently skeptical about machine-led decision-making or about AI software being used to execute some type of public services. So even if you have a system that does work well, taking the public on the journey with you, convincing them that the technology is effective, that it's safe, that it's doing something good for them, that it improves outcomes for them in some way, is vitally important. And there's plenty of examples over the last 50 years of technologies which are potentially useful. I mean, I don't want to get into a big debate about the science around them, but technologies which are, at least I think we can agree, are potentially useful, but which have lost public trust and therefore haven't been employed at all. Things like nuclear power, things like genetic modification, but whatever you think of them, we can agree that the main reason why they're hardly used in the UK is because the people behind them didn't take the public with them, didn't convince the public. And so I think this is extremely important to consider if you're talking about any application of AI in public services, how the public can be taken with you. A third area, and I'm just trying to highlight the big picture here, a third area is superficially correct answers coming out of these systems, but are they actually any good? You might have seen this was a few weeks back, lawyers in New York being fined, and they'd used ChatGPT to create a legal briefing. And ChatGPT had invented case law, which looked plausible, but didn't actually exist. And so the quality of the responses generated by something like generative technology is extremely important to evaluate. There are people right now pushing back against the idea of using predictive optimization, especially in areas that are extremely complex social lives, such as children's social work or children's supports. And they'll say, the outcomes here are so difficult to know and understand that we shouldn't use this technology. So again, it's really important to consider exactly where the technology is going to make a difference and if it is actually going to be performative. Now, all of these things are, you can mitigate these risks with sensible approaches to innovation. I think the main danger is when they're completely ignored or thought about at the end of the process. There's a lot of guidance out there right now already. The Turing has something on understanding artificial intelligence and guidelines for using it in the public sector. The Cabinet Digital and Data Office has just put out a small thing on generative AI use of civil servants, which is again worth reading. So there is guidance out there and the things you can do to mitigate these risks, but it is critically important to think about them at the beginning of any process, which is thinking about adopting this technology. That's everything I had to say. I know that was a quick tour, but I wanted to make sure there's time for some questions. So thanks so much for your attention. And yeah, really happy to take any questions that you might have.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I had a sneak preview of the slides earlier in the week, but I still learned a lot more from you speaking and talking about them today. That was absolutely fascinating. The chat has been alive with lots of comments and questions. I wonder, Mike Erskine, you there in the background curating, I think. Do you want to come in with some of the questions, please?
Yeah, I got some of the questions. I'll start with the ones which directed more to Jonathan on the presentation. And there's a couple of ones that bring in Mike on the Welsh Government sort of context. So yeah, got one from Siobhan Rogers, Jonathan, to say, I'd like to ask, what are the most public common misconceptions, I guess fake news aspects about AI that Jonathan has come across? What do people think we can do with it that is not actually true? Well, not yet anyway.
That's a great question. That's a great question. I mean, I can't help but reference this debate about the Terminator apocalypse and whether AI is going to destroy everyone. Now, I want to sort of caveat calling this a common misconception in the sense that I don't think the current technology now is going to go rogue and destroy the world. I don't think there's any evidence that it's at that level. But there are legitimate reasons to be concerned about some of the things it can do and some of the risks that it can pose. So I think it is actually quite important that we're starting to work on these sometimes frankly terrifying sounding things. But you do have the major producer, you know, the CEO of OpenAI famously said, if we get this wrong, it's lights out for humanity. And why is that? Very briefly, well, you have a technology which you can put very vague and general prompts in, and you don't quite know how it's going to interpret it. So you could say, make me some money. There's lots of different ways of interpreting that, and there's lots of different things you can do. Anyway, so that's, in a way, I've dodged that, because it's a bit of a misconception that it'll happen now, but I think a legitimate thing to think about as the next wave of the technology comes out.
That's great. Thanks, Jonathan. The next question we have is from Imogen Sheriff. So Imogen, thank you. Where does the legal liability lie if AI chatbots get it wrong with the developer of the underlying algorithms, the commissioner of the AI ?
So this is a great question, and OpenAI are definitely avoiding or trying to avoid any legal liability right now. So if it's being integrated into a business process, the person who owns that process will still have ultimate responsibility. And I would definitely say, and I think that hopefully this is pretty obvious, but if you're using it to write things, do check them afterwards. Think of this as a tool that can enhance your writing productivity, but not entirely replace the thinking process. Liability is going to be a big question though going forward. And if you want systems that make some type of automatic decision, or if you want self-driving cars that really work well, and we are now starting to see the first self-driving taxis appear, then some type of liability will have to be accepted by the person who's making the system. Because a self-driving car where you still have to accept liability and you still have to be sitting in front of the steering wheel just is nowhere near as useful as one where you can completely, if you like, delegate that sort of driving authority. So I do think we'll see more thinking in this area and more types of creative ways of liability going on to the people building the systems.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. I hope that answered your question there, Imogen. And we got a couple of related ones here from Larry, and then followed on by Rachel regarding translation, and obviously being in Wales, the Welsh language, how important that is. So compliance with the Welsh language standards is a priority for many of us, Larry said, obviously. And how will AI learn Welsh? ChatGPT isn't great in Welsh. And then Rachel's kind of followed that by saying, I can see people talking in the chat about Welsh language translation. but can AI really translate as intuitively as the human mind?
This is a great question, and I was actually eager to get your opinions on whether ChatGPT was any good in Welsh. I mean, I did try it out, but unfortunately I'm not positioned to evaluate whether the results were any good or not. So it's very interesting to hear that it's not very good. These technologies were originally conceived as translation technologies, or in fact, that was one of the major use cases of a large language model. And in many languages, the translation results are pretty impressive. But there are big questions about what's it going to do for languages where maybe it hasn't had access to as much training data as we would like it to have access to. Lots of people are thinking about right now, should we develop what's sometimes called sovereign AI capability? Should we develop capability that's specifically tuned to a given nation or a given language or a given set of culture? I am optimistic that, especially in the next generation of technology, you'll see improvements. You know, I do think that's a solvable problem, making it deliver high quality language results in any language, you know, providing there is at least a minimum amount of training data. And I'm sure Welsh would qualify for that. But I think there is an element of making sure that that use case is heard and is considered important for the people who are developing the technology. And so that's, I think, something for government essentially to be thinking about. That's how can you promote that as some, you know, important part of the technology to focus on.
Fantastic, thanks, Jonathan. As comprehensive as you can give, I think, from not being based in Wales yourself. So thank you. We've got a couple of questions here, which I just wanted to probably bring in Mike Thomas here. So Emir John from One Voice Wales comes in and says, Mike, One Voice Wales supports and guides the town and council, community council sector across Wales. Will Welsh Government be issuing guidance that we can provide to local councils at community level? And then we could showcase some successful pilot projects.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for the wider question. So we have recently issued guidance on the use of generative AI, so tools such as ChatGPT, Google Bard and the like, mainly around understanding what the limitations are and what that means, I guess, for public sector organizations in particular. So we know that the results, for example, from tools like ChatGPT are not 100% reliable. We know that the current free version that we can all go and access via the web is limited to September 2021 at the moment. So anything more recent, it wouldn't be able to answer. And we also know that these tools regularly make things up, tend to be called hallucinations, which means that we can't 100% trust them at the moment. So that guidance outlines how we might be able to use tools such as ChatGPT, but in a safe and cautious way. And I think I noted some more comments, Mike, around, you know, can we trust this to help us with reports and the like? Not yet is the answer. I think I call it eyes open usage. We have to understand what those limitations are in order to be able to use the tools in a safe and responsible way. So they're incredibly powerful, but they aren't the be all and end all, and we shouldn't implicitly trust what the outputs look like. So as I said, there is guidance available that we recently issued across the wider public sector in Wales, and I think, Mike, you and CDPS were helpful in issuing that to wider public bodies across Wales, and I'm sure that we would make that available to town councils in some way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, we'll definitely help with any sort of spreading the message across the public sector for you, Mike. And obviously, yeah, any there'll be follow-up emails to all the people that have signed up to this session with the recording, and any useful links to, yeah, resources and guidance that we can give. Another question we've got from Rebecca Rothwell. I'm really interested to learn, she said, the why, appealing to the hearts and minds of those who will be committed to this new way of working. I don't think it's a given yet that people will embrace AI, especially those already in the workplace. I wonder if Welsh Government will want to lead on this to support and guide the wider public sector.
One for me, Mike?
Yeah, for you, Mike. Yeah.
No worries. Thanks for the question, Rebecca. In short, yes. We know that AI is an incredibly emotive subject, probably more so than any other digital technology that we've seen in a very, very long time. and it will impact us all in some way, shape or form, in the way that we communicate, in the way that we school our children, in the way that we access healthcare, and in the way that we work. We are cognizant of that in the way that we're approaching our policy approach within the Welsh Government, and are already starting discussions with colleagues across the organisation in terms of how we link it to our wider social partnership approach here in Wales. That open, collaborative way of discussing the way in which tools such as AI are going to be used, for example, in the workplace. Having that open discussion between employees and employers so that they understand why it may be used, in what context, and they have access to the data that's captured as a result. So I think, to respond directly to the question, we do really want to do it differently. And we have an opportunity to do that with some of the broader policies that already exist in Wales, like the social partnership approach, like our Future Generations Act, to be able to do things in a way that makes sure that it links to broader society, that it's not just for the benefit of a small number of people and organisations.
Fantastic, thank you, Mike. And yeah, I think I've got a kind of a final question here. If there's any more questions, people have got them, please post them in the chat. So we think we could have still got a little bit of time. But this might be to the both of you, really. But maybe start with you, Jonathan. One from Phil. How far behind the technology is the policy standards guidance rules?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And, you know, one of the very striking things about these generative technologies, these large models, is that they'll be trained over a period of months, 6 months, 8 months, you know, it can take, there's quite a long cycle. And then, even though people have a broad idea of what they might do, there's a period essentially of discovery, of understanding what can this technology do. And it might do interesting and surprising things that you hadn't thought about when you started the training. And so I think that is, you know, it does sort of feel like regulation is sometimes playing catch up, because you're certainly from public perspective, if you're not following these technologies day to day, they sort of seem to appear out of nowhere and suddenly do all of these wonderful things. So I think that, I mean, I'm always cautious about over-regulating things at the beginning as well. And I think it is important to allow space for innovation and allow space for things to happen before you jump in with regulation. But I would certainly say that, you know, we don't have very much thinking right now about things like AI safety. How can we say, you know, Mike's just said, and I completely agree with this, ChatGPT is a powerful technology, but it can't be 100% trusted. And that's completely right. What's the process of getting to a technology of the same power which can be trusted? It's not clear what that is, and that's partly regulation, and that's partly some sort of suite of testing, essentially. And that's going to be something that's really necessary as we see, you know, new models being released every month, basically, and old ones being tweaked and changed.
Brilliant. Did you want to come in there at all there, Mike, on that point?
No, I guess just to echo Jonathan's comments, I think we just have to be careful not to be drawn into this black hole that is AI at the moment. It's sucking everyone in with the belief that, you know, it is the panacea that is going to fix every problem across the public sector. And it will fix lots of them, but it won't do it overnight. And it isn't the silver bullet in terms of technology for every problem that the public sector is trying to tackle. And I think it's really important that we remain problem focused and not technology focused, because AI might not be the correct technology for some of the problems that we're trying to tackle across the public sector at the moment. So back, I guess, to the beginning of the conversation around the hype. The hype is probably bigger than anything I remember, probably bigger than when the big search engines hit us in the mid-90s. We're seeing that level of disruption. It's important we just stay calm and understand, where does this fit? Where does it not fit? And how do we make it work best for the people of Wales?
Great, thanks, Mike. And yeah, we've got I'll leave this as probably the final question. Sorry if we haven't been able to address everyone's questions here today. And it comes from Dawn and backed up by Rebecca. But should AI be taught as a social model language to start removing bias? And if it learns a bias, how does it get removed? And then Rebecca's come in just to say that's such an important question. How do machines unlearn bias if only humans could as well?
I mean, maybe I'll have a first go. I agree, it's a critically important question. And you know, if you take a technology and feed it 50 or 100 years of data, within that data will be all the biases that we know are present throughout human society. And you know, I mean, there are many biases present today, but arguably the further you go back, the more you see those biases, certainly in some sectors. One, it's a really interesting developing field of research right now, which applies to bias, but also more broadly, is how do you, this is sometimes called values alignment or AI alignment. How do you take a model and make its values align to contemporary human values, and knowing, as we do, that those values themselves will of course shift over time. There are plenty of techniques around to try and do this, to have sometimes called a safety layer that prevents a model from doing certain different things, or forces it, for example, to only give one answer in a certain context. But they're very rough and ready. I mean, I also work on online safety, and done a couple of projects, for example, on Holocaust denial. And it's actually quite intriguing to look at how the large language models are approaching this subject. And some of them, if you just ask it about the Holocaust, it just won't give you an answer at all. So I'm not engaging with that subject, which from my point of view, okay, it's a reasonable fix in a way, but it's not good enough, because you're just ignoring a subject rather than giving a useful answer perhaps to someone who's trying to get into it. And you know, this applies to bias as well. So there are methods for making a model align to values, but it's a very open and lively area of research right now.
Fantastic. I think that wraps up the questions there, Pete. So I'll pass to you to close the event.
Right, diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, Mike. Yes, so that's bringing us to a close, but don't zoom off quite yet, please. We have a couple of questions that we'd like to ask you, a little survey. And I think, Jonathan, can I trouble you to move on? There we go, perfect. So there's two options. Either use a smart device, a camera, to scan the QR code there, and that'll take you straight to our quick survey. Or if you're on a device with another window perhaps, or another browser, if you head to menti.com and type in the code 49863800, that's 49863800, as you can see on the screen there, you will see some questions. And these questions are three simple ones. So one about how you would describe your understanding of AI-related technologies following this session. So just a little bit of feedback for us to see how you feel your current understanding is. There's another about how aware you are of the opportunities and challenges, as well as the risks in using AI in public services. And there's a scale judgment question there, so it's a really quick one to use. And the third one's about how ready you think your organization is to begin using AI as part of their broader service improvement plans. Again, that's a scale going from not ready up to we're totally ready. So three questions there. They're all on that Menti link, either via the QR code, as you can see on the screen, or just head to menti.com and type in the code, as you can see there. That would be really, really useful for us. The other thing that would be useful for us, I'm asking you to multitask now, only because we're rapidly running out of time. If you have a desire to learn more about this topic, we are really interested in putting on webinars that suit your needs. So please type away in the chat, in the Zoom chat here, tell us what you need us to work on next. What would you find most useful in the next AI-related webinar? Give us a steer on the topics you want us to talk about. So 2 tasks all in one go. I hope you're better at multitasking than me. Menti.com and
Pete, there's actually a question in the Menti for people to suggest their topics as well, so they can do it all in the
Fantastic.
Menti.
Okay, I missed that one, sorry.
Fantastic. Yeah, and just before you go, we'd like to, at the Centre for Digital Public Services, we run some lunch and learn sessions. These take place every fortnight on a Monday lunchtime. So Jonathan, I don't know if you can move the slide on there, just to let people know the wider work that we are doing around user-centered design and how we can improve public services, digital public services. And we've got a session on Monday coming up on how to run a workshop to map your service. These are going to be running right across the summer and also going to be recorded. We've got a session on how to do pair writing and trio writing, a new way to designing bilingual content. We're actually going to be at the Eisteddfod this year to launch a new book on this new approach to designing bilingual content. And we've also got one at the end of the summer on how to ask users the right questions. So again, please, if you want to join those, go onto our website. I'll put a link into the chat now for you to sign up to those events. We'd love to see you there. And like you said, when it comes to September, we'll be in touch about some possible, hopefully some future AI sessions that we would like to run and do some deeper dives in on with Mike and the team.
Okay, well, I think we're to time. If people are busy typing away, and we really appreciate your answers in the Menti poll, thank you very much. That'll stay live, but we are bang on 10:30. Diolch yn fawr am ddod. Thank you very much, everyone. We hope you found it useful and interesting, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure.